Thank you for joining us for this weekend's opening program for Tropical Stories Artists Tells Us. Now, if you have gone on some of our tours and as well as read some of the materials that we have shared over the last few days about Tropical, you will understand that this is an exhibition that looks at the fostered solidarities between Latin America and Southeast Asia, between artists and shared dreams, as well as vibrant narratives. Now, one of the very key aspects that we talk about, what we can see within this beautiful Singapore courtyard today, is a historical example created in between Filipino artist David Medalla, over here on the Cloud Canyon, Lygia Clark with those 7 pots near the top of the staircase, and Helio Otisika in the City Hall chamber behind you. In a time and a moment in the midst of 1960s in London, David Medalla co-founded the Signals Gallery. This was an exchange that he fostered to look at ideas of non-Western artistic strategies around. He had a correspondent he corresponded with Lygia Clark and Helio Otisika, and manifested and aided in cultivating exhibitions, for example, Lygia Clark at the Signals Gallery, and then later on help in cultivating Helio Otisika's seminal solo presentation, The Whitechapel Experiment, at the Whitechapel Gallery in 1967. Now, coming back to the present, I'm very happy and also grateful to present you a session that will look into a more contemporary example of this form of solidarity that we as a curatorial team cultivated over the period of developing this exhibition. What we have here in the rest of the Singapore courtyard is a commission by Zinny Maidagan, Dolores Zinny, and Juan Maidagan, a Berlin-based duo whose large-scale installation investigates architecture, which you see here, as part of the exhibition. It consists of 3 components, which my colleague Chen Jiayun and the artist will speak of later on. Now, please allow me to share a bit on the biography of Zinny Maidagan. Dolores Zinny and Juan Maidagan are visual artists born in Argentina and work as a duo as well as independently. Their large-scale installations investigate architecture through the history of a site, challenge the traditional notions of an exhibition space, and create new meanings. Zinny Maidagan has held solo exhibitions at the Foundation Prio in Buenos Aires, CAC Gallery at the University of California, Irvine, and the Museum for Modern Kunst in Frankfurt. They have been awarded Berlin's DAAD Artists in Berlin program in 2002, the Pollock Krasner Fellowship in 2000, and the John Simon Guggenheim Scholarship in 1998. Dolores Zinny is the director of Reinhardt School of Sculpture, the MFA Granting Sculpture Program at the Maryland Institute College of Art. So without further ado, please put your hands together and welcome Juan Maidagan, our good friend, Dolores Zinny, and my colleague, Jiayun.
Thank you, Zinny, for that introduction. And thank you so much to everyone here for joining us this afternoon. And most of all, of course, thanks to Dolores and Juan for joining us here in Singapore. This afternoon, we will open the sharing by looking at some of your previous projects as a way to trace, the sensibilities and approaches that Vientos Alicios, which is the collective name for the commission that actually is suspended above us, draws from. And then after that, Dolores and Juan will take us through a more in-depth discussion of how this work was realized. Thank you.
Thank you, Gia. And first, thank you very much to the National Gallery, to Mustafa, to Yunjin, Ginny, Celine, Jiayun, the exhibition management team, Leila, Eugene Tang. It has been an honor, and it's an honor to be part of this exhibition. Thank you very much.
And a great fun, too.
Yes.
Okay. Would you be able to begin by telling us more about a project that you realized quite recently in 2022 at DAAD in Berlin?
Yes, we can start with the image there. Just as a quick introduction, maybe as you have heard from the just moments ago, beautiful introduction to our work. We work together since '89. We are originally from Rosario, and in 2002, while we were living in New York, we were invited to the DAD. It's a program in Berlin where you spend 1 year there. And we stay and we leave. So 23 years later, the DAD in Berlin invited us to do a big comprehensive show of our work. And this work, you only will see, we will only show the main room because it's very extensive, and we are here to talk more about our recent work. But this work was conceived during the pandemic. And this dictated the work in all aspects, in its fabrication, because you have to work with the materials that were available, in the place, you know, our living room, our studio with our 2 kids became, our house became our studio, and with the theme, right, about the not knowing about what the future was about. And, but this idea of working with a limited number of materials was not seen as a limitation, but in a way as a liberation, right? So what you see there is a painting that starts with the year 2019, and it's done with fabric and acrylic. The next image will be, you will see it more in detail. I love the parrots. And at the same time, in the floor, it's beautiful.
I think they want to participate in the conversation. Those are the 2 macaws that form part of Tropicalia, so please do see the work when you have the time. I think they are dying also to be introduced. But Lynette, could we go to the next slide?
It's okay.
Is that okay?
It's okay. We can start talking later.
Here you see the painting, right, that started in 2019, and it goes till 2102, let's say, right? And it was this idea of the construction of time and the construction of numbers and a pattern superposing or imposing in this idea that we have of rational, like one number after the other. And in the floor, maybe we can talk, is again a game that we do with naming, with words and images. So in the floor, it was an abstraction of a flag in the sun, and the title was Not a Flag in the Sun. And at the same time, it was a printed canvas. If we go to the next image. No, we don't have it, sorry. But, can we go to the first image backwards? Yeah, there. You see that it's the painting of the floor, that the black shape, it would be the flag, then the red shape could be the sun.
Yes.
And then it says, keine Banner in der Sonne, which in English means not a flag in the sun, right? So it was this semantic game between both.
Yeah, it also includes the idea of a gesture, because it's just the gesture to watch anything against the sun, no? That it turns black, of course, the negation.
And it's interesting, I mean, that the title takes a kind of a negative definition, not a flag in the sun. Could you elaborate more about why it is the kind of inverted definition rather than, a positive definition, a material-based definition? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that maybe that's a negation in German language that is. It could be built in many other languages as well, but in Germany it sounds quite expressive, let's say, to say it in a certain way.
Okay.
No, which is a sort of an advice, right? Of course. And then what really happens is that we first did the painting on the floor in England, and though it came this child to the exhibition, and he saw it immediately, and he says, "Oh, this is a flag burning into the sun," something like that. She got it at that. So this design of this, the other fabric, let's say, where the sentence, it is also kind of directed to the experience of reading, let's say, like a child book. This image is kind of designed for that.
I mean, a flag is, a highly graphical and representative form of, visual representation. And I think throughout your practice, you've always had an interest in the science, of language, and here in the numeric kind of signification of numbers. And would you be able to elaborate a bit more about, why there's this interest and preoccupation with science and symbols in language and numerical forms?
Yeah, go ahead if you want.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it is a refer probably of selection. How do you get connected with the real or something like that? Most in your, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but it is like probably the flag is quite related with nations. No, the explosion of nations happened in a certain context and is still a worry and a preoccupation on how or where nations, individuals and collectives go. So maybe implies a bit the idea of the negation of nation, because I think nations are kind of lost from the beginning since foundations, particularly the post-colonial nations. We don't have a clear definition of what it is community in these nations, let's say, particularly in behavior, no?
Yes.
No, and I will say that also in the case of the numbers is this, I think that at least for us, it's very interesting to go back to the visual language and like, let's say, in where we are from, the numbers, you see the numbers are something natural, right? Like as a tree, as the sun, and they are a construction. Yeah. They are a design, right? And they do not exist in a way. It's not the passing of time. It's something that is a system that we create. So it's a representation and a measure of something, but that is not, in a way, right?
Yes, yes. Thank you. I mean, I think then correspondingly, thinking about systems, would you say that that's also the way in which you think about color? Are they systems, or are they meant to also be, ambiguous kind of forms of representation?
I think that we are both very much into colors, and I study in Rosario, in Argentina, and I was born in Rosario, in Argentina before moving to the States and before moving to Germany. And when I was a kid and a teenager, we were having maybe there like 5 tones to buy colors, right? Like 2 different kind of reds, 2 different kind of yellows. If you were lucky, 2 blues and black and white, right? And from there, I was having, like, since very young, I was going to this atelier of local artists that they were teaching you to mix and to make as many colors as possible. So again, it was not a limitation, but officio, we call, no? Something that you learn that in a way liberates you, know, like beautiful time. Yeah, I remember it as a time of growth, right? So in a way, in the pandemic, when everything was closed in Berlin, and then we were having the colors that we were having, yeah, I start like mixing what I really, in a way, I am an expert, if I could say, because I have been since very little trained on that. And I think that, Juan, coming from medicine, you also give a lot of attention to colors. You spend hours and go to the printer and see if that is the orange, no, and comes the print back and forth, right?
Yeah, without expertise.
No, different idea of color.
Sure. I think that one of the very dramatic problems we also have is the problem of specialization, right? We cannot solve also that problem, which is quite urgent to it.
Okay, thank you both. I think then maybe we can proceed to the next slide, where it's an image of a very significant commission that both of you worked on that graces one of the facades of the LACMA building. So could I invite you to share more about how literary texts actually figure within your approaches? Because I think even the title of the work, Word for Word, Decor for Distance, is a kind of multi-layered reference to art history and literature.
Can you explain the call for distance from Wallace Stevens?
Yeah, we play games. We like to play games, so we not just we. I think probably culture play games constantly, you know, and one is behind those or whatever that. So we like to work on meanings, on significates, or we are Argentinians. Also, this is dangerous because we like a lot psychology, which is. It's not a science, but directs life, so whatever, I don't know. I respect a lot of also and enjoy psychology. Though, so we're always playing with words, and so that's what happens in here. We found this poet, American poet, Wallace Stevens, was quite established, well-known, of course, more than established. He passed away already, but and I don't know. I think sometimes one is fixing poetry for the likes and for the dislikes, or for the strong and for the weak, both things. So this is a poem which is very meaningful in Wallace Stevens' career. Is supposedly the last poem he wrote. This is published in a collection by his son, and it is called Of Mere Being.
Maybe we can go to the next. Yeah, there it is.
Next
yes,
slide?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's okay, yes.
The title of the poem is Of Mere Being, and and says, the palm at the end of the mind, beyond the last thoughts, rises in the bronze decor. A gold-feathered bird sings in the palm without human meaning, without human feeling, a foreign song. You know then that it is not the reason that makes us happy or unhappy. The bird sings, its feathers shine. The palm stands on the edge of space, the wind moves slowly in the branches, the bird's fire-fangled feathers dangle down. And we translate it into Spanish to 5 lines, which says, tras el final, allá en la decoración de bronce, sobre la palma el pájaro dorado canta. La canción extraña que nos hace felices y tristes sin sentido. Cuando el viento mece las ramas, estampadas en fuego del pájaro, cuelgan sus plumas brillantes. And I don't know, what's a good way to kind of express It is, I think maybe it's a post-colonial or post-colonialist feeling, which is, how can I say it? The lack of sense, right? That in many cases we are directed and influenced not by sense, if not essentially in the lack of sense, which is not just a lack, it is something that is already built up, right? So
maybe, Juan, we can also say that the title Word for Word, the Call for Distance, the first version of the poem was saying in the bronze, the core. And then the author changes to in the bronze, distance. So the author itself, Wallace Stevens, the poet, make a correction in his own poem, right? So if we can return to the first image again of the palms, word for word is the change, the substitution that the poet is making. And when LACMA invited us to do this exhibition, now I remember, it was called LA, and it was LA for Los Angeles and LA Latin America. So it was about the Latin American presence in the state, where we can give another lecture about that and about that definition. But all the Wilshire facade of the museum, there were only palms, right? And these are palms designed by Robert Irwin, the artist Robert Irwin. So immediately we have the idea of adding palms, constructed palms, decoration palms, to the real palms, right? So you have the representation of the palm that is surrounding the real palm. And you don't notice here, but these are collages. So they are like 3 layers of different material. The ones where you see that is like sort of the cutout of the real palm that is yellow is translucent sometimes, according to the light. And then the black was having like 5 times of printing, so it was a very dense black opaque color, and the others were layers of silver and white. And this texture, you really saw it in the work, I think, right? And again, it was also it was printed, but they cut it handmade, so it has this craft thing that is very, I would say it's a constant in our work, right? This in-between design, computer design, and handmade. And then maybe we can pass to, yes.
I think that this might be the biggest collage in the world.
Yes. I don't know in the world, but for ourselves, yeah. And this is the last image before we start talking about the current project. I will put my glasses. I don't know if it is a lot of information, but we told you that this work was word for word about translation. So when we were not researching, but just attentive to the connections between authors from different geographies, Juan read Borges all the time, no? So immediately we thought about Life on the Mississippi, that is written by Mark Twain and Borges translated. And in one paragraph, Mark Twain writes about the mud of the Mississippi in the mouth of the Mississippi. And Mark, when he's describing the Mississippi River, very full of details. And he's saying the mud deposit gradually extends the land, and Borges take the paragraph and almost exactly put all the information that Mark Twain is given, but the only one that he's changing, he's saying despojos de un continente en perpetua disolución. So he's saying that the mouth of the river is the dissolution like constant dissolution of the continent, right? So this idea of one constructing and the other dissolving. So this is when we met Mustafa, right, in 2017, like 6 years ago, and we start talking with the team about doing something that connect us all, no? Like the artist, and making these links between, Southeast Asia and Latin America, right?
Thanks, Dolores.
So that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think then we will move forward to the slide with the other tiger. I think it's just the previous. Yeah. So would you both be able to share, because in our discussions around the Library of the Tropics, which have kind of now culminated into years of exchange, we discussed a range of texts from The Myth of the Lazy Native by Syed Hussein Alatas to Aku by Karil Anwar, which Juan, Annalisa, and Pak Latif Mohidin just read at our opening. So would you be able to share more about how Borges's work, The Other Tiger, impelled and informed the making of Tigresses, which you see behind you here as a set of 10 overlapping banners in a precise formation?
Yeah, okay. So I will, Juan wants me to read in English. Yeah, I can read. I mean, there were many ways that we started to work, but I think that if we have time, we were all, like Mustafa, and we were all talking about The Other Tiger of Borges, right? This poem that you all know. And where he's talking about the real tiger, the represented tiger, and the tiger of the imagination, right? So the last paragraph, just not to make it too long, and then you can all look at the poem. It says, and I only have it in English, but of course it's much better in Spanish. Let us look for a third tiger. This one will be a form in my dream like all the others, a system and arrangement of human language, and not the tiger of the vertebrate which, out of reach of all mythology, paces the earth. So what we were trying to think is, what was the third tiger? And sometimes it's when you stop thinking, suddenly the answers come. And so we thought, okay, maybe the third tiger is not one, but it's many. So it's many, and maybe it's not a tiger, but it's tigresses, right? And that image stay in the mind and rest somewhere in the unconscious. And I think that this work, in a way, as Juan was saying, is again a game between words and the representation of things. So can we represent something constructing one image that is not a vivid representation of the tiger? And in this sense, here you have this palimpsest that is using the same trick that the tiger used, that is called disruptive coloration in biology. That is how to hide in the forest, not to be seen. So in a way, you have all the yellows of the tiger with these black lines that make this interruption and the difficulty of recognizing the word. And that is hanging there, that is occupying the space, and is ready for us to decipher, right?
Yeah, I think we also can say that on all the years that we were together doing Zooms in time to time, twice, 3 times a month sometimes, that were an extraordinary event for us, exercise or just an exercise of friendship too, of course. And I don't know, what I want to say is like, Borges says Juan told a story that when he was very young, they were going often to the zoo. And very often it was a kind of visit, a normal visit or way around for middle class or upper class people. And was a tiger on a corner. And he says that his sister, which was a few years younger, he was 11 and his sister was 8, she says, it is done for love, right? And probably, I don't know, this poem much later written is coming into love. And another thing that probably this something that a writer says, a writer that for Borges was very, very important, Paul Valéry, he says in a certain moment between First and Second World War, and the things were not going very well in Europe, he says something like, that is not enough political coalitions, there are also necessary fictitious strongholds, right? So in this way, the tiger can be this fictitious stronghold, which plays quite a role in the Southeast Asia in history. Though, yes.
Yeah, and I think that also we have, as where we come from, right, from Rosario and from South America, all this strong, abstract and concrete tradition, right? So we want you to say, okay, where is all this tradition that is ours, although modernists claim the abstraction to be universal and basically born in Europe, but we know it's not, that there are plenty of origins, places, so this is also hanging, right, from the idea of the fictitious tiger. So in a way, that's why it's this, if you want, complex design of geometrical shapes that also is a word, but this is like, what do we do? It's more like a question again, not an affirmation, but what do we do with what we created and what is ours, right? And also knowing that what we were studying, because we were very curious about all the Zooms that we got during this pandemic and the friendship that we really developed with the curatorial team. Like knowing that there were artists here that were doing things that were really connecting and enriching what we have been doing in South America. And I must say that I didn't have, and I still don't, have a lot of knowledge, and I am really eager to know more about what is happening in this area, right? And how much is enriching and expanding the understanding of even what we were doing and what we are doing in South America, and now that we live since 20 years or more in Berlin, and like me also being in Baltimore a lot, directing this program. But I am thinking that through all the dialogues, we got the expansion and the enrichment of our own narratives, right?
Yes, I think both of you were such important interlocutors for us in refining the kind of strategies around the library, which you see one iteration of in Gallery A, this, where the double volume space is. But in fact, through our conversations with Juan and Dolores, we actually cycled through many different literary texts that were spanning the history of Latin America and Southeast Asia, and looking at some very fascinating kind of points of convergence, with Octavio Paz visiting Asia, or Rabindranath Tagore being translated widely in Latin America as well. So I think this study of contamination or cross-cultural pollination is still ongoing, and it's really the beginning of a much longer adventure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe we can move to the next slide.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, okay. We did. Okay. Yeah, this is, we thought with Juan to show you some images that you don't see of the work, and it's how we start constructing. So these are one of thousands, let's say, of drawing, and there is working on in the design, right, of the words and how they overlap. And because I don't know if you look, I mean, if you turn your back and you look at the work, you will realize that the design is opaque, but is as if it will be translucent, right? That the letters have the same design. Each part has the design of the part that is preceding it. I don't know how to explain it because it's quite complex, but maybe if we jump to the next slide. Yes, if you look, for example, at the T, I will show it, hold on. I will show. I mean, don't think that I am crazy. I have two, because one is to look from far away and one for close. But if you look here, the T, for example, this part of the T is here, and it's because they are superimposing. So this was quite difficult to achieve by hanging. The exhibition team has to hang it like 3 different times or more. But I think that's another aspect, right, of simulating transparency when at the end it's opaque, right? So maybe we can jump to the next.
So, thank you, Dolores. So could you speak more about the process of assembly, the physical construction of both tigresses and trees? Because what we see here on screen is a rendering that was done in an architectural studio that really already kind of maps out the work. But again, it's a graphical representation. It's not the work in space. So do talk us through, this process of assembly and creation, really, on a physical scale. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what we did then when we did the design is working with the 3D rendering, right? And because they were quite big, so we were having a 3D model of the space. And maybe if we go to the next slide, please. Yes, and we begin dyeing the fabric, so each color is, it's not that we bought the fabric with color, right? It's canvas, and they were all dyed. Actually, to get each tone, sometimes we were like making like 10 proofs, so it was like really 2 months before getting each color. And the tones were, when you have the image of a tiger in the computer and you go and you pick some colors. So they look the same, but sort of like, they are like maybe 20 tones of yellow there. And yeah, they were coming for like checking the image in the computer, right? You know, like with the pixel.
Yes.
Yeah, for me, I think it's one thing that matters, that is that it is like the presence of the tiger somehow. It has the aspiration of this fictitious, always fictitious. Borges also insists that everything is fiction, right? Not just fiction itself. Though it is the tiger is in the jungle, and you don't see the tiger, but anyway you see the tiger constantly, right? Because they are afraid, because you listen, or it's just a glimpse. So the idea is that somehow, it is a title essentially that says it's tigresses, and if you see this, you immediately understand that in here is written tigresses, even though you read it or not, So that's a revelation.
Thanks, Juan. So, I mean, I think we can go to the next slide. which details the process of construction at the fiber department in the Maryland Institute College of Art. Yeah.
No, that we built this in MICA in Baltimore, in the fiber department, is where I direct this master's, so we were having the facilities and a team of students and alumni and designers that, that help not only dyeing, because it's a special process, but as you see here in the studio, making each work, right? Sorry.
Yeah, the pieces were cut in laser. But I think also in this idea of the title again, no, the tigress is there and you can read it or not, but you understand it is written there. It is, I don't know how to say. Yeah, it's the idea that the work, it cannot go wrong, you know, it's like that. That's very important.
Well, of course, and after doing each one, we were trying them and see if they really overlap, no? There you see. The next one. This is the experimental print that it should be there, so when you come next time, you're going to see it.
Yes.
And that's the title of the whole exhibition, Vientos Alisios. That means trade winds. And trade winds are the winds of the tropic, right? With the sand and everything that arrives to the States and to Europe. And if I understand correctly, because I am not a geographer, but when you have colorful sunsets, it's because the Vientos Alisios brings all the particles and dust. When you get like colorful sunsets in Europe and in the States, it's because of the sun coming from the tropics and
the fertility of Amazons is because of this, right? And vientos alisios are also important because they are studying them in some theories on chaos, particularly. And so for that, they study big movements, water or air, to try to understand what chaos is. And it says that they are not sure if the winds are stopping or are accelerating, in which time they are. But if the winds, at the moment that the winds finish, the planet is gone, right? So it's not dramatic. Though.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think I was also doing a bit of reading up about vientos alisios, and it's a very advanced kind of ecological phenomenon that distributes, I think, Saharan sand onto the Amazon and actually revitalizes the ecology through that. So it's a very poignant title selected by both of you. Yeah,
and it's very important for us, of course, the presence of Elio, Idisica, and Lygia Clark.
Yes.
It is like a vivid connection, right? Though.
Yeah, there are definitely some chromatic resonances, I think, between the paintings and installations of Elio and tigresses, and as well as trees, which we have the poem that Juan wrote and is in our exhibition catalog. And Juan, I would like to invite you to share a little bit more about this poem and this work, this aspect of the commission.
Yeah, I think that it is about the lack of sense, no? Mm-hmm. The people say this work or this design evolves from a very different thing, much about the politics of Europe, and then it turns to, it changed titles all the time, which is, for me, is very important. Before they didn't have titles, them were trees, and now, for me, they are horses, right? So I think that from horses will evolve to something else. And it's probably a quest for understanding meaning. Now, Borges says again that the books are composed by words inside, and in the spine is a title that never has any relation with the inside, you know? So maybe that's a reflection on that.
So the skin of things is not like the interior in that sense. Okay,
Yes.
well, we also have, I think, 1 or 2 images detailing the behind the scenes. And what was this process like of assembly and construction? You know, I think it was so interesting because when the works were brought here, they were all flat. You know, they weren't brought as kind of how you see them now. You know, the canvases were flat, and the kind of propulsion pods were also brought as single flat sheets. So, I mean, how did you arrive at this process of assembly? You know, and here on the right, you're actually taping the kind of plastic ribs that gird each of these cylinders. You know, how did this process kind of unfold?
Yeah, well, one thing was that the transport was pending in that way. To transport this would have been a big cage and whatever. So, and this comes from a model that was this size, not much more than that, and was just fabric and 2 rubbers, black and red, and a golden strip of paper that were hanging in our bedroom for many years. And then at the time of enlarging, it was a problem to look for materials, how to translate these two. And it was a kind of a miracle how it happens in Hall itself there. Maybe it was related with this idea of there was no way wrong, it won't be wrong, and it's going to happen. And the incorporation of the ribs were the point.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. My name is Mustafa. I'm one of the co-curators of the exhibition. Just maybe one quick point on fictions. I think the title of the exhibition is Stories. And in a sense, that was why we selected the word stories, because it can also entertain the possibility of fictions, no? Within these kind of canonical kind of formations of art. But my question is kind of connected to what both of you were speaking about. It's a debate that we are yet to have in Southeast Asia, but it has been had in incredible depth and detail in Latin America, which is around the neo-concrete, right? And it's really incredible relationship with abstraction. We haven't had it here. And I think this will be important as a moment within the region here, within Singapore too, to build this. And both of you have been, I would say, entangled. I mean this in a positive way, or maybe in a productive way within these debates. And could you just speak a little bit more about this? I think it's important for our publics here to engage with this. What is the neo-concrete? Sorry, I'm asking you to go into a little bit of teacher mode, but yeah.
No.
Yeah.
That's fine. I am, abstraction and on concretism in Latin America is quite a tradition, no? I would say, and also in a way it's a link with Europe as well, right? But I think that at least I believe that what we do is like, as Juan says, it can be a tree, it can be horses, these are tigresses, right? And there is a lot of stories that you can tell yourself, and it's a lot of fiction and imagination and connections and if you would say the stream of consciousness, right? So in a way, it's not this elevated idea of abstraction, but it's more a way of playing. And I mean, you can see how these were made and assembled. And I mean, if you notice, they are all different light blue shades, right? And so I think it's very much in the idea of making and of free interpretation in a way, right? And of playing with the verbal language and the pure visual language. Yeah.
Yeah, I also think that, I don't know, the resilience is important for art, no? Maybe it's one of the last refugees art has, resilience on, or is to whom you talk and you, by ears, we really understand that we are not talking to the people we think we talk, right? Art is this, yeah, it's essentially a market, right? How they say it?
Like a resilient.
Well, let's go to resilience. And in this idea, I think Argentina, I try to also to feel, or I feel differences, right? And South America and Argentina is very influenced by Europe, institutionally, basically, no? Not culturally. But these countries have been and are still dependent and on the hands, on the disposition of Europe, right? What they request, what they need, you know. And basically, these economies are based on extractivism, right? And we all know if we continue with extractivism, not just in Argentina, if not in the globe, which is all over, right? The time will be shorter, that's all. Time, in any case, is going to be shorter, but it's going to be more shorter, right? So, and we will continue with that. We essentially know that, though. And that's the kind of resilience. The art does not, we don't find a way to maybe the kind of dream is that in a certain moment, artists, maybe they have that power. But very, very far on time, maybe the artists were the ones who, and now it's not. That's the kind of feeling, no? Not to make it so clear sky for the artists, though.
I think that also we were talking about doing something. I mean, we wanted to occupy this place, and that this place was festive, that it was not an exhibition space or traditional exhibition space, so it's something that is in between the street and the white cube, or the exhibition, the traditional exhibition space. So I think it has that feeling, right? We were really doing it for this space. And at the same time, because we were producing it where we live, right? Half in Berlin, half in Baltimore. We wanted to do something that it could be transported easily, that didn't weigh quite much, that could be rolled and assembled again once here. And so, and not to put ourselves into the place of the morally, you know, righteous people, but to say, okay, like, is there a way to do something that doesn't require like 200 containers, because this is a huge space. So it's more like the idea of the event, right? Of like a circus. You unfold something and then it can be folded back and wait again for another time to happen. So it's very much a happening in a way, right? A performance. It's a performatic space. So like this idea, now you're listening to us, but we imagine people here hanging out and sitting in this space, and hopefully this work will trigger some of the things we have talked about and some others we haven't.
Thank you, Dolores. Yes, I mean, I think in terms of the points you just raised, you know, it's very interesting to think about making art as a series of, you know, maneuvers, you know, and operations and assemblies and performances, rather than necessarily a static object in space. And it's been quite interesting to also observe how people have been kind of gravitating towards the courtyard, I think, in a different way since the work was installed, perhaps just over a week ago. It just feels as if something is inhabiting the space now, and that, you know, bodies are then much more also drawn in some ways to occupy it too.
Thank you.
So with that, thank you so much for your
thank
sharing
you.
and your insights.
Thank you very much.
And yeah, we'll have the next session with Circe and my colleague Hui Bin coming right up.
So I'm delighted today to be joined by my colleague, but also I think now friend, Circe Henestrosa. Circe is the head of the School of Fashion at LaSalle College of the Arts. Yes, you may clap. And she is also a fashion curator. Circe has been working with Frida Kahlo's personal archive for about 10 years, presenting her first exhibition of Frida Kahlo's wardrobe at the Frida Kahlo Museum in Mexico in 2012 and at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London in 2018. Since then, she has been working to bring Kahlo's story to the cities where she lived or spent time in, including New York, San Francisco, and Paris. For our exhibition, Tropical, which I hope all of you have had the chance to see, Circe has been an invaluable guide, sharing with us incredible stories of Kahlo's life and art, which are presented as part of the exhibition upstairs in an iconic self-portrait by the artist dated to 1945. Today, Circe is here with me to share more about the core of her research, which stems from the fascinating discovery of Kahlo's wardrobe in 2004. Our conversation today will unfold across the ways in which Kahlo's experiences of disability, ethnicity, her political outlook, as well as her gender identity informed her life, her work, and her art. So without further ado, Circe, please.
I am so delighted to be invited to participate in this forum. And thank you everyone for being here today with us. Thank you, Huimin, and to all the curators, Mustafa, I see you there, as well as the curatorial programs team for organizing this for us today.
So as we start on this journey, we're going to be telling lots of stories today. And there's another great story, I think, Circe, perhaps to ground the conversation, to really share with our audience here today a bit more about your personal connection to Frida. And I know that there's an amazing photograph by Nicolas Murai that you shared with me, and maybe you can talk us through it as a way of starting.
Okay. I would like to start with this photograph, and I wanted to tell you, I was interested in Frida Kahlo's wardrobe and how the disability and the ethnicity part of this wardrobe connected with each other. And I started with the ethnicity part of the wardrobe. And why? Because I am a wearer of this dress that Frida adopted as her logo. So it was only logic for me to look at my own roots to try to understand why she had chosen this iconic dress from the Tehuantepec Isthmus, which is located in the southeast part of Mexico. It is a matriarchal society where women administrate the society. And in this photo of Nicolas Murai, you will see two women that are sitting at your right, my left. These were my aunts, who were indigenous people from the Tehuantepec Isthmus. And when Frida decides to adopt this dress, my aunties used to bring these huipiles and dresses to Frida Kahlo by the time she decided to wear this beautiful dress.
Yes, thank you. Next slide, please.
So here you can see in this photo, for those who don't believe me, how Frida is wearing in this photograph by Nicolas Murai, and you see Nereida wearing the same skirt. Fabulous, no?
Yeah. So maybe Circe, you can also share with us now about how all your research got started and what many of the exhibitions that you've curated have really been founded upon, which is really the discovery of Kahlo's wardrobe, right, in 2004.
Yes, so I've been, as I was saying, I've been working with this archive for the past 10 years. And it was here at the Blue House, which is today the Frida Kahlo Museum, where her wardrobe was discovered. And it was here, you see her on her bed, in her 4-poster bed with the mirror, and in the bathroom adjacent to her room, it was this bathroom that kept these treasures for 50 years.
And what was in that amazing trove that you guys found?
Well, we discovered around 22,000 documents, 6,000 photographs of the artist, and around 300 personal objects of the artist. So her wardrobe was composed mainly by pieces from the Tehuantepec Isthmus, from Oaxaca, pieces from Puebla, Chiapas, and beyond. We have some Chinese pieces that recently we learned that she acquired in the Chinatown in San Francisco. We have some American blouses. This is the first time she was captured by Tony Frizzell in the context of fashion for Vogue America in 1937. We have some European pieces that we actually don't know where these European pieces came from. We suspect that when she was in America and in San Francisco and in New York, she was going to the flea markets and probably in Paris as well to get some pieces. But if we say that vintage is 1930s, let's say, a vintage pieces, so Frida was looking for pieces that were at the turn of the century, so that means that she was acquiring vintage pieces before vintage, So fun. Next one. So we have an amazing collection of jewelry, perfumes, medicines, and an incredible collection of her medical orthopedic devices.
No, Circe, it's so interesting looking at these images to see how self-aware Kahlo was about how she was constructing her image and kind of embodying and kind of inhabiting a lot of these kind of clothes and dresses. And I think on the next slide, there's an incredible photograph that you also shared with me, which is actually of her maternal family. Right? So could you maybe tell us a bit more about Frida's roots and how she became so engaged with these rich cultural as well as material sources?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Humin. This was a very, very important, a key object in my research because, as I said, I wanted to understand why she had adopted this traditional dress. In Mexico, we have many traditional dresses, and why particularly this Tehuana dress. And a lot of scholars said that she used to adopt this dress to please Diego Rivera, her famous husband. And I have to say, while I don't deny it completely because they were source of inspiration to each other, of course there were other reasons. And when this photograph appeared of her maternal family, all dressed in the Tehuana attire, this practically proves that she had this legacy well before meeting Diego Rivera. So we see how she circles her mom, and she puts Mamá Oaxaca, Matilde Calderón, 1890. So here we see her wearing the huipil grande. The huipil grande is also, or resplandor, is also an important headdress piece that was typically worn by the women of the Isthmus of Tehuantepec around the 18th and 19th centuries. Usually they would be worn for fiestas or religious occasions. And while Kahlo frequently dressed in the Tehuana dress, there are few examples of her wearing the resplendor piece, but she also painted herself in 2 occasions with the resplendor. And at this point, it's very important to explain to you that as a fashion curation, I was looking at her wardrobe and her dresses. My material culture were her garments. But I was using photography and painting to understand her styling. And you can see immediately, I saw how the way she dressed was the way she painted herself, the way she photographed herself. And at that point, I realized that all these objects contributed to that construction of identity, but also to her artistic production.
Yeah, so I think looking at, this painting even, there's also another theme that starts to emerge for us as the curators when we were looking into Frida Kahlo's practice and also trying to contextualize her within our exhibition. And that's really looking at, I think when we look at Frida's portraits, there's something very introspective about them and something also very psychological. So it seems that, through our discussions with Circe, that another theme really starts to emerge across her work, and that's the theme of, I think, disability and also pain. And I think while as, curators, we started to look at it from this kind of visual representation or looking through the symbolisms in her paintings, what's interesting through Circe's research is that she gained an entry point to some of these very difficult themes actually through the wardrobe, right, Circe? Yeah.
Exactly, and the disability aspect of the wardrobe will be very important. At the age of, and this disability aspect will inform her choice of dress as well. At the age of 6, Kahlo suffered from polio, and the polio left her with a right leg shorter than the left leg. And she describes how she started wearing 3 to 4 socks to level her leg and to wear long skirts. So this shows how she established a relationship between her dress and her body from a very early age. Of course, much later, the almost fatal accident will inform also her choice of dress.
Yeah. So I think it's very interesting because she had these kind of medical issues already as a child, but there was another incident which kind of really shaped her life and came to also determine her artistic output. So at the age of 18, so very young, she was traveling in a bus coming back from school when the bus actually collided with a tramway. And following this accident, she was sort of confined to her bed for almost a year. And it was actually during this time that she started to paint. And it's interesting because she taught herself to paint. And talking to Circe and reading more about Frida Kahlo, it's interesting to think about painting as a site or as a space for recovery and even therapy, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. We can show the next one. So here, to recap on the asymmetry, you can see her boots, how they inform this difference. And yes, like as you're saying, thank you. Actually, this is the only recollection she ever did of her accident. And this drawing is called The Accident. She did it 1 year after this almost fatal event. She was on her bed for almost 9 months, and this is the beginning of the career of an amazing artist, but also the beginning of the deterioration of her body. But the important thing about this, what I wanted to focus the attention to, is how this drawing is divided into some sort of duality. So on the top side of the drawing, we see the scene of the collision of the tramway with the bus, and we see some dead people. And in the lower part of the drawing, we see something that appears to be the blue house, but we see a Frida in a stretcher and another head of another Frida that marks this idea, according to my colleague and art historian Ganit Ancori, as a split. And usually when you suffer a trauma at a young age, you have this effect of a split, but this becomes part of Frida's visual vocabulary, and this use of the duality will be a recurrent theme in her work.
Yeah, so I think on the next slide, we have an example of an artwork that I think really encapsulates this notion. This is a work titled Tree of Hope. Again, a self-portrait which really looks at this notion of duality. We can see how on one side, she's presenting to us this very traumatic experience of a medical trauma on one side, and on the other, she's again donning this very powerful symbolism through her dress, which is actually concealing her pain, which you can see on the other side, while also revealing, I think, certain aspects of her inner psyche as well. Yeah.
Exactly, and this is also a very important aspect of the research, because by putting together all these elements, in here, this is how the disability and the kind of traditional dress aspects, it's precisely that. She would conceal her body underneath these beautiful fabrics and garments, but then she will reveal it bluntly through her art. And this specific artwork was done in 1946, 20 years after she drew that accident drawing, and in response to a spinal fusion operation in New York. So all the time she is responding to the events that are happening. And again, the duality aspect, so we see her dress, we see her undress, we see the night, we see the day. That are also the dualities pertinent to our pre-Hispanic civilizations that are dealing with the moon, with the sun, and etc.
Yeah, so I think on the next slide is another kind of contextual way to look at Frida. So I think as I've been taking people through the exhibition, actually not many people realize or know the fact that she was severely disabled at different points in her life, and that adds an additional layer as to why she often depicted herself in these seated postures. And actually, if you look at how she's kind of volumizing the dress in many of her paintings, again, there's this notion of concealment, and it's only through kind of biographical or contextual reading that we actually know, what was actually going on underneath the dresses as well. Yeah.
Exactly, and this aspect is very important because me, as aware of the dress, I understand also the geometry and the composition. This is something, again, as I was saying, she could have chosen, we have many dresses, many traditional dresses, but she chooses a dress at the time in terms of the political aspects of the choice of dress. She was very conscious of the power of dress as a vehicle to convey different messages. So, but at the time she adopts this dress is the time of the end of the Mexican Revolution. We had a minister of culture that said that the only way we could come out of the traumas of the revolution was through the promotion of culture and education. And this is the time when he commissions all the Mexican muralists in 1922 to paint depictions of Mexican culture, heritage, and Mexicanidad. And Kahlo aligns herself to these values and beliefs, and she wants to look very Mexican. 1920s, at the end of the, at the turn of the 30s, the fashion was Paris, the fashion was Hollywood, and the big brows here. Nobody was dressing indigenous dress at the time. So she not only chooses a dress that comes from a matriarchal, powerful society and symbolizes a powerful woman, it's also a dress that allows her to communicate her political beliefs. She was a communist. She wanted to look Mexicana, and in a way to assert herself as a female artist in a very male-dominated environment at the time in Mexico. But here, the disability aspect will play also a big role because the geometry of this specific dress and the composition of the dress The fragmented composition, if you see, all the adornment of this dress is concentrated from the torso up. So that means that she has this, and the dress is composed by this headpiece and this short huipil and a long skirt. So that means that she's constantly editing herself, and the viewer will always look at her in a frontal way and distracting them from her wounded body and her wounded legs. So she will look, because the construction of the huipil is short, it wouldn't crease. So she will look like a queen sitting or like a queen standing. Next slide. Again, the seating positions, I wanted to also make emphasis on the time she spent sitting. You saw the other tree of life and what I was explaining, how she conceals, and then next one, reveals through her corsets, look how she's showing us. And probably at this point it's important to talk about the ethics around the exhibition I curated, because I don't show anything that Frida didn't choose to show us herself. And I think we have many objects that we don't show because I haven't seen them in any photographs or anything, and so then that's an important aspect of it.
And I think, Circe, just going back to your point just now about the strategies of dress vis-a-vis the muralism movement, I think that's a really interesting point. Thinking about how, even within the context of the Mexican Revolution, the ways in which artists activated painting as a site for resistance, change, and expression was also very differentiated. It's not just, class differences, but, gender differences, how artists also found ways around, their kind of gender, ethnic identities within these contexts is also very interesting. And I'm very glad that you acknowledge the kind of subtle difference and nuance within these experiences.
Yeah, and here in the corset section, I'm fascinated by this apparatus because you see how she paints on them. So it's almost that she paints on these corsets as an act of rebellion. And that means that, for example, if she wanted to take the corset, her shirt off, because her corsets were painted, it's almost like a blouse. And I think these are very powerful objects because she turns them almost into accessories or fashionable items as well. So fascinating.
Yeah.
Oh, well, this one is...
Yes, one of, very, very powerful
Broken
painting.
column. So, Broken Column, she paints this. This is one of her most powerful and iconic paintings. Broken Column was painted in 1944. And we see a bare-breasted Kahlo, how she depicts herself injured but defiant. She wears her orthopedic corset similar to the ones shown that I was showing in the exhibition. And she was using painting, as you were saying, also to examine experiences of illness, disability, pain, but also to articulate her own resilience and capacity to create meaning. And I think that's very important because she creates meaning, like from her disability to portray also beauty and art.
I think, it's very interesting looking at these examples because I think Frida is someone who has a very storied biography. And it's interesting how I think she herself was also aware of that and how she activated some of these through her works as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we move on to other topics now, I wanted to highlight this modest drawing that also appeared during the discovery, and that was where all my thesis came together. This modest drawing, we see a naked Kahlo, and we can see her left leg with the butterflies symbolizing her imagination, health, transformation. And we see the right leg significantly thinner than the other. We see her naked, we see how she puts her corset pieces, and the silhouette of the Tehuana dress, and says, appearances can be deceiving, meaning what you see is not what you get. My first exhibition in Mexico was entitled, Appearances Can Be Deceiving, The Dresses of Frida Kahlo.
Wonderful. Okay, so I think looking at these ideas of identity and presentation, I wanted to also ask Circe if you could also tell us a bit more about Kahlo's relationship with her family, perhaps as a way to access some of these.
Yeah, because we discuss a relationship with the mother, but then the father plays a main role. And actually, when I take the exhibition to the Victoria and Albert Museum, in Mexico, we had the Blue House. When you go to the Blue House, you understand the context of Kahlo's life there, and then you see her wardrobe. When we took the exhibition to the UK, you have to start from the beginning. Then I had to contextualize the whole of the Blue House. But this allowed me to expand the reading and the lenses. And I invited one of the main painting scholars, Ganit Ancori, to work with me in this exhibition. And she told me how important and highlighted the importance of the relationship between Frida and her father in photography. So I decided to weave this as part of the biographical aspect and start uniting that relationship as we were weaving the whole aspect of the family. Then we enter the relationship with the father. So here, Guillermo Kahlo, we see him. He's a Hungarian German. He arrives in Mexico as part of the immigrants that arrived at the end of the 19th century. And he changed his name to Guillermo, which is Wilhelm Kahlo, and then Guillermo is in the translation in Spanish. And so he became an important architectural photographer for the government of Porfirio Diaz, who was the dictator previous to the Mexican Revolution. And here we see on the right how he is photographing himself. And 10 years after his death, Kahlo based this other portrait where she describes and emphasizes aspects of his identity, and she describes how he was epileptic, and he was a very sensitive man, but a man of books and an intellectual, and how he was obsessed with self-portraiture. So I can imagine his work also influenced Kahlo, because he also took a lot of photos of Kahlo and her family.
So I think moving to another kind of very attractive part of Kahlo's biography is actually this notion or this aspect of her marriage to Diego Rivera, and I think
Well, I mean, before we move to Diego, let me just explain here quickly. No, the next one is fine. So here we see an important aspect of the photography is how she learns how to strike a pose. So the father takes these two photographs, but also you can see how she's using, again, her hairdos and her wardrobe to communicate different gender identities. And this is the first time we see her donning a three-piece suit and discussing aspect of gender fluidity. In 1926, when all the texts we know today, the academic texts we know today to explain all this gender fluidity and didn't even exist. So she is also embodying these aspects of gender identity.
Yeah, that's actually a great parallel to the artwork which our self-portrait is right next to in our exhibition by the Malaysian artist Patrick Ng, where he also does this kind of very elegant kind of queering of the self, again, through this kind of medium of the self-portrait.
Yeah, these artists we're so avant-garde. Okay, so now you were talking about out here. Sorry, we're kind of like just see the three-quarters. These are all photos taken by her father. So you see how photography influences her work. how she replicates the three-quarter pose, and how she uses photography to inform her paintings. Okay.
Yes, so here's our Diego Rivera slide. So maybe, Circe, you can tell us a bit more to kind of contextualize not just the relationship, but I think also their social connections, the kind of context in which Frida and Diego were working in during this time.
Well, I mean, Frida Kahlo grew up, and at the age of 22, she marries Diego Rivera. He was 43 years old, and the mom described them as the elephant and the dove. So this was a very an interesting relationship, a difficult one for you guys to understand how big Diego Rivera was. Diego Rivera was the second solo exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art in 1931 after Matisse, not even Picasso.
And Gauguin as well.
Exactly.
Matisse, Gauguin, and Picasso. Then
Yeah.
Diego Rivera.
Yeah, so he was huge. And right after they get married in 1929, they go to San Francisco. They live 3 years in the US, in San Francisco, in New York, and Detroit. And this is where Frida, when they go to San Francisco, where Frida starts painting in a more serious manner. And here we see her, the portrait of the marriage. In San Francisco is where she finishes the Tehuana look. And she asserts herself as the Mexicana when she goes to San Francisco. But you can still see here how she depicts herself as the Tehuana, but the person holding the painting palette is him. And we can see how demure she looks here, no? Yeah. So these are just some photographs. In San Francisco, she was photographed by Edward Weston and Imogen Cunningham, and you see how she starts incorporating all the very heavy beats and all of that as part of her attire.
Yeah, so is it also interesting to talk a bit about San Francisco, actually, as a very important site? I mean, we know that that was also where Diego Rivera painted some of his most famous and renowned murals.
Yeah.
But there were also, I think, other artists in San Francisco, one notably Miguel Covarrubias,
Yeah.
who is also included in our exhibition. And he also presented a series of maps for the San Francisco Fair, and we have reproductions of those maps hanging in our exhibition space as well. So I think there was something really interesting about this particular moment and this particular site of convergence, where there was, in a way, a space to rethink some of these traditional ways of looking at the world as well.
Exactly, and I'm sorry, Humin, because I forgot to mention in the first photograph we show you,
Miguel Covarrubias.
Miguel Covarrubias and his wife were also, and Mexico as a center, and you're right, San Francisco becomes also a really important transition city where Mexican artists were, like showing their work and true. Well, now we move to Detroit. So Kahlo loved San Francisco. She enjoyed New York very much. But when Diego Rivera was commissioned to paint a mural cycle at the Detroit Art Institute, they moved to Detroit in 1932. Frida was not very happy in Detroit. Right after their arrival, she found out that she was pregnant. And initially, she tried to abort the pregnancy, and the abortion failed. And she began to consider keeping the pregnancy and keeping the baby. But before she could embrace this plan, on the 4th of July, 1932, she has a traumatic miscarriage where she almost bled to death. And as my amazing friend Galliera and Corey, this is the moment when the taboo-breaking artist we know today becomes Frida Kahlo. Because this is the first time we see a woman, as far as I know, nobody had depicted at an abortion with vaginal fluid, blood coming out of her body, the way Frida Kahlo did it this way. And this is what marks the groundbreaking, forward-looking artist we know today in this precise moment. So now we see, this is the only lithograph she did of that abortion. Here we see how she takes off her Tehuana costume. She exposes her most intimate experience. In this lithograph we see, instead of a wife, she's all alone and divided herself. The vaginal blood drops and unborn fetuses, we see that in one side. And on the other side, we see the aspect of procreation. But now we see, with the same heart, who's holding the painting palette. A third arm comes out, and she asserts herself as the artist with the same shape Rivera was holding the palette in San Francisco 1 year before. Next slide. So dramatic. But we have to put the drama. Okay, this is a very rare fresco she did also at the time that Rivera was doing a series of movable frescoes in New York. And this is the only fresco we know of Frida Kahlo. And I thought it was important since he was such a great muralist and how she also dwelt with him. Tried to do a little bit of fresco painting, and she hated this painting, and she wanted to break it. But luckily, Lucien Bloch, who was assisting Rivera to do his murals, said, no, oh my God. And she kept this little fresco painting that she pairs with her with her jade beads. But something really beautiful is how you see the painting, the green painting. She's trying to emulate like the painting on the bead to see if it's the same green. You see how she's painting on top of the bead to see if she's getting the same color. Next. So here we're just showing a couple of other self-portraits dressed as Tehuana with her Xolitl dog and some of the torsales that are very iconic from the Isthmus of Tehuantepec. If you get the chance, you can go and see the Galeones exhibition also at the ACM, where I have contributed to the textile part. You will see 2 Tehuana dresses and similar jewelry to this, but just coming from the Peranakan women. So I wanted to make that, draw that little parallel, but this type of jewelry is the jewelry that Tehuanas wear in Tehuantepec. So now finally, we arrived to this final painting we want to share with you. Is on view here at the National Gallery as part of the exhibition that Mustafa and women did together, the tropical exhibition. And it is a self-portrait with one of her pet monkeys. And I want you to know how the monkey is wearing a green ribbon, as she's wearing also her green ribbon, matching ribbons. And her pets were like surrogate children to her and were a part of the microcosms she builds at the Blue House. She had a lot of animals. She had deers, she had monkeys, she had parrots, and she paints herself with these depictions of all her animals that some scholars said used to be kind of like her surrogate children that she could never conceive. And we want to end with a quote by Alejandro Gomez Arias, who was Kahlo's high school sweetheart and a long-time friend.
Yes, so Circe has gifted this quote to me, which, as our friend and colleague Mustafa says, is one of the best gifts that you can give anyone. So this is a quote that Circe has gifted to all of us today. Who was Frida Kahlo? it is not possible to find an exact answer. So contradictory and multiple was the personality of this woman that it may be said that many Fridas existed, and perhaps none of them was the one she wanted to be. So with that, we are going to move, I think, into a slightly more open-ended discussion to include all of you as well. Tingy says that we have to wrap up. So perhaps you can come and find us after this session. And also we look forward to seeing you in the exhibition where you can perhaps also look at this painting as well as the other paintings in our exhibition with a bit more context. So with that, thank you very much to Circe for spending some time with us today.
Thank you,
and thank you all for your attention as well.
Thank you, thank you.
I would like to welcome to stage Boedi Widjaja and Mustafa. Boedi is a participating artist whose work is currently in the first gallery, The Myth of the Lazy Native. Boedi Widjaja, let me give his brief biography. Boedi Widjaja's practice contemplates the concept of house, home, and homeland through long-running interdisciplinary series that are developed in parallel with each other. Widjaja was trained in architecture and has worked in graphic design. Past exhibitions that he has participated on include the 6th Singapore Biennale in 2019, the 9th Asia Pacific Triennale in 2018, the Diaspora Pavilion at the 57 Venice Biennale, among others. His most recent solo presentations include Kang Ao at the Esplanade Tunnel, Hawaii Gallery, New York, Rivers and Lakes Tanah Dan Air at Shang Art in 2018. So without further ado, I hope you can welcome my colleagues and my friends here, Boedi and Mustafa.
Thank you. Yeah, we're going to kind of keep going, and thank you all for joining us. I'm going to keep my opening remarks very short because we're going to be hearing from Boedi as he takes us through a number of critical works which will also help us effectively contextualize the work that we have on display at the tropical exhibition upstairs. But just before we begin, I wanted to kind of perhaps share an anecdote about how we came to the work through a conversation. It's interesting, no? Sometimes when you're having dialogues, you realize that artists have been thinking about questions that curators are trying to grapple with and think through in a very serious way. So maybe, Boedi, you'll work that anecdote into the process as we were discussing, and we came to find your work or re-find it as well and represent it here, albeit in a very unique context. The story that I'm referring to is of the Museum Nusantara, which used to exist until very recently, in fact, in the city of Delft in Netherlands. And you will notice that in the exhibition, we are not limited by the mediums of painting and sculpture, which are the common and the more dominant mediums we present here at the National Gallery as part of our surveys on modern art. But there are also cultural objects that we have worked in a very careful and considered manner, I hope, which enable us to kind of draw insights into larger questions of how ethnographic thinking also, dare I say ethnological thinking in the 19th and early 20th century, intersected with how we can actually tell the story of art from a Southeast Asian perspective, you know, because this is all kind of connected in a sense. And to think that particular genres are very clean and neatly divided as they are perhaps today in universities is highly problematic. And the exhibition tries to also bring this out. But without much further ado, I invite Boedi to take us through, and I'll come in at various points, or we'll just have a dialogue at the end of it. So, Boedi, please.
Thank you, Mustafa, and thank you, Qingyi, for the very kind introduction. So the work that is presented in Tropical is a sound piece titled Datum, which means reference point. It is a term that is often used in architectural work to refer to a particular point on site from which much of the measurements are taken from. And this work, Datum, consists of 100 over gamelan sounds that were recorded from an ensemble gamelan piece called Kiai Pirayata, a gamelan, a 100-year-old gamelan that was acquired by Museum Nusantara in Delft from the Keraton Surakarta, or the Solo Palace, which is the town of where I was born. And what was interesting to me was how I had encountered these gamelan sounds. I was then researching into materials for a project titled Black Hut that I will shortly talk a little bit about, an architectural installation. And I came across this library of gamelan sounds that had been put up as an open source materials by sound researchers who had recorded every single note from that 100-year-old gamelan in Museum Nusantara, and had offered it up online for musicologists, for research students to use for their academic and research purposes. And when I listened to these sounds of the gamelan, the first thought that came to me was how disembodied they were. I grew up near the Solo Palace, and hence during my daily commute from home to school, I would at times hear the sounds of gamelan playing from the palace grounds. And from my understanding of the gamelan is that the sound and the material gamelan itself is something that is unified. In fact, the tuning, the music tuning system of the gamelan is derived quite specifically from the build of the musical instrument, in contrast to a more kind of a systematic, the 12-tone chromatic scale that the Western music theory uses, which can then be replicated across all instruments. So that sense of disembodiment of the sounds from the gamelan piece led me thinking about, led me to think about how my experience of language, particularly the language that I learned as a child, Bahasa Indonesia, how I had experienced them quite differently. The sounds of this language when I use them in a foreign land, in a sense, almost like a mother tongue without the motherland. Yeah. And I went on to explore these gamelan sounds and subsequently integrated them into the Black Hut installation. Next slide. So I will play the sound pieces for a while. So what you just heard were the inverted sounds of the gamelan. When you play these gamelan sounds in reverse, they sound very pulse-like and almost, well, not almost, but extremely unrecognizable. I was frankly surprised that Mustafa and Hui Min had decided to place them at the Library of the Tropics, because I can't imagine people being able to concentrate reading your books while listening to these pulses. However, when I conceived of this datum sound piece and inverse the sound of the gamelan, what I had in mind was a kind of a mirroring, a kind of a double vision of the original gamelan sounds, and perhaps a sense of traveling forward, like into the future, in reverse. And that's, these are the impulses that informed the gesture of playing the sounds backwards rather than keeping them as original sounds. The diagram that you're seeing on the screen is a plan view of the Black Hat installation at Erlou Gallery in LaSalle, College of the Arts. There are two plans. Again, a kind of I see it as a kind of equivalent or a kind of a double vision of the site. The irregular trapezium that you are seeing is the original plan of the gallery, which I then created its equivalent in terms of area and reconstituted it into a square. And where the where the circles are within the trapezium, those are the original columns in the Erlou Gallery that I used to approximate a new center, a reimagined center for that space that I would then place a datum as a new reference point for the space and also for the installation. Next slide. These are views of the Black Hat from outside the gallery. I wanted the walls to be fairly porous, to reference the kind of thin skin-like walls that we see in tropical architecture. This is another view. You had to, the previous slide. You had to enter by stepping over the bottom metal bar, very much like how when you entered into a Javanese or a Balinese house, you had to first step over a short kind of parapet. Yeah. So there is something, I wanted to weave in some kind of a ceremonial elements into the experience of this hut. Next, please. Another view of the hut from the outside. Next. This is what you see inside Erlou Gallery with the kind of a screen-like or skin-like wall at the outside. Sorry, a previous slide. And the black wall that you are seeing there, that was made using very specially produced concrete. And this concrete is really, it was thinly applied, very much like a veneer or membrane of sort, just a few millimeters thick. Next slide. Another view of the Erlou Gallery space. If you could see hanging from the top is a directional speaker where datum was installed. The new center of a new imaginary center of this space and installation. Next. A detailed view of the concrete membrane. I wanted to think about tropicality, the use of our environment and our humidity as a way to almost to break apart or to break down the homogeneous concrete surface that was espoused by the European modernists, and having a kind of a real and material interaction between the European modernist ideals with the tropical nature. And what I did was to mix in a large amount of salt into the concrete. And the textures here were partly achieved by mixing in very rough and large salt crystals, and allowing this salt to surface or to bloom through the process of efflorescence over time. Quite a common architectural phenomena for concrete surfaces in the tropics, but which we don't see very often in Singapore because they are usually painted over and cleaned, as like a lot of things in Singapore. Yeah. And next slide, this is another view of the salt-infused concrete membrane. Next, please. Another view of the installation from outside. Every part of the installation was exposed. I wanted to show both the skin and the bones. Again, a reference to tropical architecture where the walls and the structure, the wooden frame in particular, are all exposed for the viewer. Another view. Next, please. Yeah. The Black Hut and, of course, Datum had further iterations. Next, please. And this was the installation of Black Hut at the Gallery of Modern Art, which was part of the Asia Pacific Triennale in 2018. The site was quite different from Erlu Gallery. Over here, I was given a mezzanine, kind of a site that consisted of a mezzanine floor and a ground floor. And next slide. This is a plan view of the site. The gray rectangle that you see on your right, that is a plan view of the mezzanine. And the black grid is where the concrete surface was. I wanted to think about the confluence, the very interesting confluence between the Brisbane Queenslander, which is a kind of stilt housing, with our own tropical Malay stilt housing. And of course, the raised floor platforms that we see in Javanese joglo houses. And what I did was, next slide. Sorry, please go back to the previous slide. Yeah. What I did was I first extended the mezzanine floor, which was called Gallery 5 in Kargoma, by building a very short extended concrete platform, the black surface that you see in the photograph. Next slide. Next one. To create a kind of space underneath that platform, which I found interesting because it is a kind of a liminal space that separates the floor from the ground. It's almost, again, that presence of a double vision. You have the presence of two grounds, one that you step on and the one below that you build on. And this is where Datum was placed, where you see the cubic elements on the floor was where Datum was installed. Sorry, can you please go back to the plan view? Next. Yep. It's a little bit hard to see, but you could. There are 4 blue squares, somewhat at the center of that circle. Yeah. Those represent the 4 cubic elements on the floor, which were petrified wood. They are mineral wood blocks. And I use them to mark, again, a new center, or to sort of both decenter and recenter the space through the building of this black hut installation. Next. Yeah, sorry. Previous slide. This is the kind of an overall view of the space underneath. Next view. And this is a view from the mezzanine floor of the extended concrete surface. Yeah. Next. A detailed shot of the concrete surface. The somewhat grayish patches that you see were the salt marks produced over time through efflorescence. Not very clearly seen in these photos, but there were some diagonal lines. Those were salt lines. As the salt migrated from the surface, from the concrete towards the surface, they started to form these lines that marked the cardinal lines that I had inscribed into the concrete during the building process. Yeah. Next. And that work at Kagoma was the first of a diptych of black hut installations, the second of which was installed at the Coleman Gallery, at the Coleman Courtyard in the National Gallery of Singapore. Yeah. This is a documentation video that was made by a friend of mine, a filmmaker, a Singaporean filmmaker, Harry Chu. He inhabited the black hut for a period of 12 hours. Due to the constraint of time, I am unable to show the full video, but he managed to capture the hut against the changing light conditions at the Coleman Courtyard. Yeah. Next, please. This is an overall view of the black hut installation as seen from the top of, I think it might have been level 2 or level 3 above the staircase. The site was again a very interesting one because again, it sort of mirrored the Brisbane Kagoma site in the sense that here we have a set of staircase that led from the ground floor to a new basement. And in my mind, it was a kind of a strange phenomena because in a lot of newly refurbished or renovated buildings, the new would usually be built on top of the old. But here we have something new built below something that was the old, and which I felt told the story of Singapore in many ways. Yeah. And these are some diagrams that to show how the form of the installation was derived. I had first imagined a ground line that extended from the ground floor across the staircase that created a kind of a vertical surface. Next, which I then flipped 90 degrees to generate a new ground plane, which I then subdivided into 2 parts. Yeah. Next. Some images of black hut from different vantage points. The photograph on the right is a detailed shot of a kind of an alcove-like space where datum was installed again to mark a kind of imaginary center of this stairway. Different perspectives of the black hut, and again the presence of the salt efflorescence on the concrete surface. I had, since Black Heart proceeded to, to experiment using the reverse gamelan sounds in other projects. This is a video piece that I made in 2021 that used the gamelan sounds as encoded or as a method to encode a hybrid DNA that I synthesized together with a geneticist to speak about ancestral memories. And for this video, I had first used the hybrid DNA as a music score. And depending on the position of the different chemical bases in the DNA, sorry, the previous slide, yeah. The different gamelan sounds were then used to feed into an algorithm that reads the score in an infinite way, almost like a living thing reading and writing itself. Next, please. A short excerpt of this generative video. Yeah. The images were taken in 2012, more than 10 years ago, when I visited the village of my paternal grandfather's, where he was born, for the first time. And many of the people whom you see in this video were actually my long-distance relatives whom I met for the first time. Yeah. Hence, the gamelan pieces were used to sonify the hybrid DNA sequence that represented a kind of a material presence of my ancestral memories. Next, please. This was a later work made last year and presented at the Esplanade Tunnel. For this work, play the sound? Yeah. For this work, I used the gamelan sounds, this time not reversed, to encode, using Morse code, an ancient Tang Dynasty poem written by Li Bai that spoke about that spoke about gallantry or a specific group of people. In Chinese, we refer them as xiake, or not exactly knights or something, but more as, I don't know, like people who, I mean, some people call them gangsters, okay, but in this instance, the poet Li Bai was so enchanted or so admired some of their values that he wrote this poem to kind of sing a praise over this group of people. The social context for this xiake was that at times when there was, I think, a kind of where society and wasn't functioning as well, and where you have the presence of crime and so forth, you had people who knew how to fight with swords, who were willing to offer that expertise, yeah, for hire. Yeah. And this motif of the xia, or the wandering xiaker, is present in one of my ongoing body of work, Gang O. Next slide, yeah. That this exhibition was about, yeah. Some images of the installation on the wall of the tunnel. I had also presented a 4-channel video that shot still images from this particular film genre, the wuxia film genre, a Chinese martial arts film genre, popular among the ethnic Chinese community in Southeast Asia, in a certain period of time, in the last century particularly, that I grew up watching in Indonesia. And the encoded poem in the form of the gamelan sounds were played across the entire tunnel to accompany this 4-channel video. Next. And the last work that I would like to share today that makes use of the gamelan sounds is a recent film that I made, which is now still showing at Objectives, Center of Photography along Waterloo Street, where I had collaborated with a Singaporean music composer, Jonathan Yip, to make a soundtrack for this performance for the camera that combined the sounds of the gamelan with space sounds, sounds that were observed at the magnetosphere, again from online sources found on the internet, to accompany the visuals of the performance, where I communicated in a metaphorical and in a literal way with these cosmic particles called muons that are found around us as a way to think about language and cosmologies. I will just share a little bit of that film. Sekarang saya bisa melihat engkau. Di mana aku? Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Boedi. I have a number of questions, and maybe I'll just begin by sharing the story of what happened to the Museum Nusantara, right? Yes. Which we haven't shared with the public, because if you notice, the story is also narrated in the exhibition, but essentially, to cut the long story short, in 2013, the Museum Nusantara in the city of Delft in the Netherlands ceased to exist. And this museum was essentially kind of built in the late 19th century, early 20th century, to kind of house things that various Dutch colonial civil servants had brought back from the colony of the Dutch East Indies. And the city of Delft also had a training institute where these civil servants, colonial civil servants, were trained and then thereafter sent over to what is today Indonesia. But by 2013, this museum had somehow kind of waned in a sense because clearly empire had ended and memories were kind of fading also. And the building itself also occupied quite a central place within the city. And the city had changed. Time had passed, generations had shifted. And so as a result, the city decided to kind of give away its collection. The more formal word for it today is known as deaccessioning of a museum's objects. And they first kind of offered a large part of the collection to Dutch museums, Tropen Museum, Rijksmuseum, and so on and so forth. And they did take some of it. And then there was quite a number of things that were left. And the question was, what do they do? Of course, it was offered back to Indonesia. And there was a kind of a condition, as I understand it, that the collection that was being given back would be kept intact. And for various reasons, that didn't come to pass. And that kind of dialogue, I guess, fell through. Subsequently, a number of museums from across Asia were invited then to kind of come in and make selections of what was left. There were museums in Malaysia, in South Korea, and in Singapore. The Asian Civilizations Museum, which is just located across the road, was also invited. And the curator, who was in charge at the time, went in and selected 151 objects, which are now today in the Singapore's national collection. And Hui Min, my colleague, had been kind of studying this story and this phenomenon of a kind of a recent repatriation of objects and what this actually means to be holding these objects. Because these objects were also, they appear to be aged, but actually they're objects from the early 20th century. So they are, in fact, as far as we are concerned, modern objects. They are contemporary. And as we began to study this and kind of just understand what it means to hold them today in trust, so to speak, we were kind of looking at the various documents, talking to the various curators, and then I kind of met Boedi one day, and we were in his studio, and he started telling me that, oh, you know, Datum, the work that's actually installed in the show, was based on a gamelan set, an entire orchestra that used to be in the collection of the Museum Nusantara. And I found that quite fascinating in a sense that Boedi had already been tracking the story well before it kind of became a story, so to speak, as well. But it's also sort of kind of trying to think about how we can today bridge these questions vis-a-vis kind of architectural thinking, which Boedi spoke about at length, but also a kind of a tropicality, no? Tropicality as a way of thinking, as a way of dreaming, not as a symbol or a form or a shape per se. And I think the discussion that we had just prior to this, the two sessions, I mean, if I may just kind of recall them a little bit, what Dolores and Juan shared, you know, kind of a meditation on time, right? Or even kind of a recalibration of a constant metamorphosis, right? That the only thing that's certain is change. And in this change, there is camouflage, there is kind of reorientation, maybe even a kind of a strange recollection. These are themes that are kind of running through the entire exhibition as well. So if you ask me whether you will find banana trees and coconuts, unfortunately, you won't in this exhibition. And which is why I was drawn to it. And my kind of maybe the first question that I have for you, Boedi, is, if we were to stay with gamelan, right? I could see that it's kind of just recurs, no? But also the inversion of that very tune, if you want to call it, or tones, if you want to call it that. Can you just talk a little bit more about it? I mean, is it biographical in your sense? Because there are moments at which you do make biographical references. Or is it a kind of a code, right, for saying things that you cannot otherwise say, right? And then I have kind of a much more formal question, I guess. This sense of the vibrations that you feel, no? They are sometimes haunting to me, sometimes actually quite empowering as well, but also sometimes quite futuristic, if you think about it. And that was sort of, just to respond to your query earlier, that was why we located it within the Library of the Tropics, where there is this kind of almost a reminder to not lose focus, but to be lost in the details, so to speak. Yeah, so a few questions, but yeah, maybe we'll work our way through them as we go along. Yeah.
Thank you. There are quite a number of questions in there, so I'll do my best to unpack them. Speaking of dreaming, datum originated from a very strange dream that I had. And it was one of the few dreams that continue to be so lucid in my head, even years after I had it. And it was a dream where I found myself in the interior of a cave. And in that cave, I saw a lying figure on top of a surgical bed. And as I walked closer towards the figure, I could recognize the figure's face to be that of Le Corbusier, you know, a very famous modernist architect. Right? And above Corbusier was a TV screen, and he was looking intently on the TV screen, which showed footages of the facade of many of his concrete social houses, like social housing blocks, right? And all of a sudden, he started to do something really strange. He started to use his hands to pull his own face apart. Yeah. So it was kind of it was as if he was performing some kind of self-cosmetic surgery or something, right? But there was no blood, right? And I realized very soon that why that was so, because he was dead. Yeah. Hence, there was no blood. Yeah. So I was looking at a dead Corbusier, pulling his own face apart, and looking at the TV screen of the facade of his housing blocks. And as he moved his face around, the facades of his housing blocks started to shift as well. So that was the dream that I had that led me to think about the architectural surfaces, skins, screens, the tropical house and its thin walls, but also to that idea of the mirror, the kind of reflection that I saw in that dream. Not so much as kind of symmetry, but a kind of, I don't know, as a, almost like a comparative surface between the face and the building, right? There are two different things, which I think something that Tropical is trying to do with Southeast Asia and Latin America. So the gesture of inverting the sounds wasn't so much a gesture to create a symmetry, but a way to acknowledge a profound transformation of the gamelan after the sounds had been disembodied from the material instrument, and acknowledging perhaps the freedom that came with this embodiment, the freedom to transform and to imagine new possibilities and pathways from that point in time. As to the biographical aspect, much of my work uses or has the presence of my personal experiences, but they really serve as the biographical aspect served as more a camera, an acknowledgement or a making present the camera that produces the images. So the works are not so much about the biographical story, but it acknowledges how one's personal experiences frames the perspectives and the methods and the processes in that work. Speaking of the camera, another anecdote came to mind. My very first experience with the camera was, I believe, when I was around 10 or 11 years old, when my mother came to Singapore to visit me and my sister. We were then studying in Singapore, and my parents were still living in Indonesia. So during school holidays, they would sometimes come to visit us. And she brought us to the Istana during one of those open houses. And I happily played with the first camera that I had, right? It was was pocket instant camera. And back then we were still using negative film. And after a whole day, and a very tiring day of exploring the Istana, taking photographs, we brought the camera to a camera shop where to have the negative film processed. The next day we went back expecting the prints, but lo and behold, we were told that the film was empty. It had nothing. I was so disappointed, but as I thought about it, I somehow was led to believe, or at least the narrative sprung in my head, that perhaps the images had been retained by the camera. It had stayed there and refused to be printed on the film. And another thought that came to mind was that whenever I see an empty roll of film today, is that something is there, but I can't see it. Yeah. And hence the presence of the biography is really there to very clearly communicate the presence of this camera through which images are seen or produced and are explored. Yeah. The formal aspects of this reversed sounds, I would say that and this is really just a pure speculation on my part. As part of my art practice, I use drawing and frottages as one of my primary methods of making images. Hence, when I inverted the sounds of the gamelan, it did feel quite natural of a gesture for me, because I immediately thought of making a sonic rubbing of these original gamelan sounds. Yeah. And to me, the reverse pulses, they are a way for me to look at the image of the gamelan, yeah, through the inverted image that you often see on the negative film. Yeah. It's another reality, but it's the most material reality of the image. Yeah. It is an image that is formed through chemical process. The film has a distinctive smell to it. It has a distinctive tactile quality when you touch it. Hence, the reverse gamelan sounds, to me at least, felt much more palpable than the original sounds that felt to me like this amorphous image, yeah, or an imaginary image of something that I had experienced before as a child. Yeah.
So in fact, it does have a form, if you think about it, no?
Yes, yes, it does.
It's not just tactile, it is also, it has a shape?
Maybe not something that I could perceive with my eyes, but something that I could feel. Because I am very interested in ways of seeing that, well, not to completely exclude visual way of seeing,
Sure.
but also to seriously consider other sensorial methods of seeing or perceiving, so to speak. Hence, much of my photography works made use of very tactile methods that do not privilege the visual, the ocular way of making an image as much.
This slightly more, just shifting gear just a little bit, and staying with the question of encounter and kind of just the practicalities of this. How did you come upon the open source sound footage? Was it something that you were looking for, or is it just something that you came across?
To be honest, I can't remember very well.
Maybe it doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
everything happened in a blur, right? But I remember that I was looking for materials to do with the Keraton Surakarta, with the Solo Palace, because the Black Hut was a project that meditated on the notion of dwelling, and dwelling in my birthplace at least included my experience of the palace grounds that I had to go through on my way to school and back from school, back home. And it could have been in that process as I was looking for information or inspirations related to the Surakarta Palace that I accidentally came across this gamelan set, or the recorded sounds of the gamelan set that was acquired from the palace by the Museum of Nusantara.
Yeah. I think I'm going to leave it there, if that's okay.
Yeah?
Just one quick note, Ching is going to come in a little bit, but just to share that next weekend we'll also be having a lecture by Richard Hassel, but also in the course of the exhibition, Boedi is going to be back taking us through the exhibition itself on a tour of sorts, which will be facilitated by one of my colleagues, Huimen. So I think it'll be quite beautiful to kind of just walk through the exhibition next time and get a sensing, no? And fill ourselves with more vibrations as we move through space. But please join me in thanking Boedi and for the fantastic work.
Thank you very much for your time.